Hey everybody. Hi there everybody. Welcome to our event. If you're here joining me live, please make sure to let me know in the chat, introduce yourselves, let me know a little bit about yourself, what language do you teach, how long you've been teaching, how long you've been using Duolingo for schools, where you're located, whether or not you are already part of our educators network. And if you're not, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the educators network later and sharing the link so you could join us. But yeah, introduce yourselves in the chat. Let me know a little bit about yourselves. Hey, hi Tim, nice to see you. Hey David, great seeing you as well. For those of you who don't know me as well, I'll introduce myself. My name is Bridget. I work for Duolingo for Schools. I am a past language educator. I taught French for 5 years in upstate New York before I moved to the south of France just a year ago. So I fulfilled a lifelong dream of mine there. But now I work supporting teachers such as yourselves in the classroom and running our educators network on Facebook. So our private network of Duolingo teachers who use it and share tips and tricks as to how to use Duolingo in the classroom. So I'm really excited to be here with you all and talk a little bit about project-based learning. I'd also be curious to know whether or not you have had any experience with project-based learning. Have you ever tried to implement it? What are some of your thoughts around project-based learning? So let me know in the chat as well what you think about project-based learning. Hey, Tracy. Hi, Pamela. Great seeing everybody. Hey, Christina. Nice seeing everybody. Thanks for coming. So it is just me up here, however, so I'm going to try my best to pause periodically, take a look at the chat, make sure that I'm not missing any questions. If for whatever reason I don't get to your question, I'll make sure that I reach out to you at the end of the session so I can get your question answered. But feel free to utilize the chat, interact with one another as well. You're able to add emojis, you're able to tag each other as well, so you could have conversations in the chats. But let's get started. After talking about some tips on how to use project-based learning in your classroom, I am going to be talking about an opportunity to get swag for your classroom as well. So at the end of the session, we're going to talk a little bit about an opportunity to get swag for your classroom, which is probably the most requested thing for teachers and students, some Duolingo swag. So make sure you stay towards the end of the session while we discuss that opportunity. But let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about project-based learning. So first I want to talk about what exactly is project-based learning. So project-based learning is a teaching method in which students gain knowledge and skills by working for an extended period of time to investigate and respond to an authentic, engaging, complex question, problem, or challenge. So the aim of this is to engage students in solving a real-world problem or answering a driving question, and it's going to require an extended period of time. So often we think of projects as a culmination of a unit. With PBL, with project-based learning, it's very often that that project itself is the unit. Especially in the world language classroom, an extended period of time is really important for students to gain the communicative skills necessary as they investigate and respond to the problem in the target language. Two, another thing that students need is it requires meaningful language use. So particularly meaningful language that reaches an authentic audience. It's a big part of PBL. It needs to be hopefully reaching an authentic audience of some sort. So of course that can get tricky in the world language classroom when students' communities are mostly in their native languages. So you'll have to think outside of the box a little bit. For example, are there any programs in your community that reach an audience of native speakers of the target language? Do you have families in your school who speak the target language? Reach out to them and see if they'd be interested in collaborating with your classroom and breaking down those classroom walls a little bit. I've even seen world language teachers network with other world language teachers around the world to virtually connect their classrooms. So you could think of it like pen pals, but make it virtual. And lastly, PBL requires use of life skills, which is a big thing. So these communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, problem-solving skills. So these are the 21st century skills by ACTFL. So this is one of the many benefits of implementing PBL in your classroom. Your students are not only going to be gaining skills and utilizing the target language in meaningful contexts, but they're also gaining so many problem-solving skills that they're going to use for life, not just in your classroom. So now that we've answered the question as to what exactly is project-based learning, Let's look at how we can implement it in your classroom. So first idea I have is the Duolingo podcast. So you could utilize the Duolingo podcast in a PBL classroom a few different ways. You can either use the podcasts themselves during the investigative period of the project, i.e. for their comprehensible input while digging into a topic more. For example, either you or your students can be choosing which podcast they would like to focus on by going to podcast.duolingo.com. And I'm going to make sure I share this link with you so you all have it. So you go to podcast.duolingo.com. From there, you could listen to the podcast. You could see a description. You could see the complete transcript of the podcast. And the podcasts are especially useful because they also include authentic images and they dig into the culture of the target language more. For example, I've seen in the French podcasts, they've highlighted the Tour de France, as well as other French-speaking countries and cultures, as well as the background of la bise, which is that French greeting of kissing cheek to cheek. So the podcasts are really, really strong element for that investigative period of certain topics as well. And some specific project ideas around the podcast could be, the first being, how can we create a social media campaign of the differences of the target language speaking world? So the problem or challenge in this kind of question would be that some people aren't aware of the cultures and the diverse cultures behind the target language. For example, both the French as well as the Spanish language have a wide range of cultures and countries that speak these languages. So in what way can your students highlight some of these cultural and even linguistic differences in some cases? So I say social media campaign, again, with that idea of this message being disseminated to an audience, an authentic audience, ideally. But of course, you can also have your students create a report of some sort or even a podcast of their own, so modeling the Duolingo podcast. This idea would be, how can your students educate not only themselves, but those around them about their new language? And the podcasts highlight a lot of these differences and therefore could be used during that investigative period of the project, as I mentioned before. Next idea around the Duolingo podcast. In the Spanish podcast specifically, I've seen that there are a lot of episodes around climate heroes, right? Or those advocating and fighting against climate change. Students can listen to their stories and then respond to the challenge. What can we do in our communities to protect the planet and act against climate change? You could have your students submit a detailed proposal of changes in their community and school, and then present that proposal to the school board or local town council and hopefully start implementing some changes. It would be especially impressive if these presentations given to these policymakers were actually in the target language. Maybe some of these policymakers don't speak the target language. You could be following up with an English translated report printed for them so that they can follow along. But it would be really cool, though, if your students could actually go to the town board, speak about specific action items to change in the community in the target language. And if you have a community of target language speakers in your city or your town, this could be a great event to invite them to and start a conversation with them in the target language about some specific changes for your community. So again, even if these policymakers themselves, such as your principal at your school, the school board, or the local town council that you may want to attend, even if they themselves don't speak the target language, I still feel as if they would be really impressed by your students giving a presentation in the target language and then following up with some actionable items printed out in English for them so they could actually make a difference when it comes to climate change. So those are some examples for the podcast. I'm going to take a moment, I'm going to pause, I'm going to take a look at the chat and see if there's any questions at all. Feel free to put them there. Huge fan of the podcast. Me too. I'm glad to hear that. Let me know how you utilize the podcast. I'd be really interested to know a little bit about your ideas around the podcast. Oh, so I'm talking about, are some people getting snow? Snow all day in Canada. Where in Canada are you right now? I'm originally from upstate New York, so very close to the Canadian border. So I'm also used to a lot of snow growing up, but no longer here in France. And some people are talking about they're warm and sunny in Florida. Nice. Awesome. So if there's any questions at all about project-based learning, make sure you put them in the chat and I'll circle back to them. But let's talk a little bit now about Duolingo stories. So you could utilize Duolingo stories in a PBL, project-based learning classroom, a few different ways. So just like with podcasts, you could be utilizing the stories themselves during that investigative period of the project. So i.e. for their vocab, their expressions that students can then use themselves. You can be choosing which stories are relevant to the project-based learning topic, and you can go to duolingo.com/stories on your desktop and have your students go to this link as well. And there they're able to see all the stories available and pick and choose which story they would like to read. And you could also download a PDF of the stories from your teacher's dashboard. And then another question, or excuse me, another challenge or possible PBL idea specifically would be you can use the stories as a model for projects. For example, the project itself can be story time at a local library that hosts events for the target language community. So students in groups can be tasked with creating characters similar to the Duolingo characters, or even capitalizing on the Duolingo characters and utilizing them themselves, and creating their very own stories, bringing these characters to life and getting ready to either perform a live reading of the story with the TL community at their local library, or even record the event for future use. So an added layer of complexity would be to have students prepare to pose some questions for the community based upon the story. Similarly to how Duolingo does this after the stories and during the stories as well, they're asking you questions depending upon the story and the vocab around the story. And these questions can even be open-ended questions, so students can be ready to engage in conversation with the community about their story and about their characters. Again, an idea like this would be really ideal if you could partner with a local library and invite a community of target language speakers at your town or in your city. So some other project-based learning ideas. So an idea perfect for more beginner to intermediate students would be: the school has some foreign exchange students and their families who would like to know more information about your school in your community. Your students can create a video walking students around the school and or their community and highlighting some of the need to know items. So if your school actually does accept foreign exchange students, definitely talk to your administration about how you can share this student-created resource with future students and their families. So again, that's that idea of getting that authentic audience. And an idea perfect for more advanced students would be: what are the steps to respond to a medical emergency in the target language? So say your students are studying abroad and there is an emergency. Who do they contact for help? How do they communicate this emergency with the proper authorities or ask others around them for help? I see a project like this being really helpful if the output itself is a flyer of some sort. That way it can be shared with students at your school who may be studying abroad in the future in the target language country, or with local colleges with study abroad programs with the target language country. So that way, not only will your students be learning valuable skills and communication necessary for possible emergency situations, but also helping other students who may find themselves in that situation in the target language community. And I wanted to share actually a PBL-esque project that I implemented my first year of teaching. So it was really missing that outside audience of native speakers that we strive to include when it comes to project-based learning. But it did allow for an investigative period where students learned more about France specifically, as well as challenge them to respond to a specific problem using those 21st century communication and collaboration, that creativity, that critical thinking, problem-solving skills as well. So the problem was that I was going to France during the summer for a month-long study abroad program to continue my own learning of the French language. And I wanted to visit a city I'd never been to before, apart from the one I was already visiting. So I put students into groups and I presented them with this question: which city should I visit and why? So they only had that question. They had the ability to choose any way that they were to present this information to me, any output, whether that be a slideshow with Google Slides, whether that be with a video presentation, whether that be with a handout of some sort, so students were able to choose that output of the project. And if students convinced me in their presentations, I would visit that city and actually send them a postcard themselves. as well as feature it in a blog that I was keeping for my students during my travels. So again, it was missing that outside community piece, but it did allow my first year students to learn about the country of France specifically, since that's where I was going, in a unique way. And I did break down those classroom walls a little bit when I shared with them my experience abroad over the summer through a blog that they could follow. So now just to recap, utilize the Duolingo stories and podcasts as models for PBL projects. So ask students themselves to be creating stories or podcasts as the output of their PBL projects. Next, you could be utilizing Duolingo stories and podcasts in the investigative period of a PBL project. So for PBL, as I mentioned, it's not all about the end output. It's also about the input. So you're going to use the podcasts and the stories for a lot of comprehensible input for your students as they investigate and interact with the target language to answer a specific question or challenge. So I didn't mention this one before, but I wanted to put it here so I could highlight this. Input over output. So this may be controversial since output is what we all expect to see and be able to physically have and degrade for our students. But in project-based learning, I'm going to make the statement that input is actually more important than the output. The input itself, that is that investigative period, that collaboration with their peers, that creativity, that problem solving, this is what it's all about. So even if the output itself isn't as grand as you would like it to be, for example, that local town board meeting, your students are still learning a lot of the target language that they can use in the future, as well as so many other life skills they're going to utilize outside of your classroom. And then lastly, don't be intimidated by project-based learning. It doesn't need to be 100% perfect every time, where your students are always going to the community and speaking with native target language speakers. But think about in which ways you can implement projects around a problem or a challenge for your students and allow them to take the time to investigate and respond to the challenge with their peers. So I'm really curious now that we recapped a little bit. Have you ever implemented PBL in your classroom? So have you ever tried to do this? What are some of your thoughts about project-based learning? Let me know a little bit about your experience with project-based learning. And I'm going to take a moment, take a look at the chat, see what's going on. I am going to be talking about the Educators Network in just a moment, so I'll make sure to share the link as well so you could join. Yes. Yeah, the Facebook group would be a great place for you to share some of your project-based learning units. We also do have a shared resource folder. Let me share this with you, actually. So if anyone else doesn't have our Duolingo Educators shared resource folder, I'm going to share this with you here. So anything here you're able to download, you're going to find a lot of Duolingo artwork, for example, that I know a lot of teachers like to utilize and print out and play with their students. You're going to find a lot of community ideas. You're going to find some guides for administrators as well as parents. And then under resource drops specifically, this is where you'll find all of our community shared resources. And so you'll actually be able to edit this and add anything. And anything else that you see here too is free to use. You're going to find under the resource drop some Duolingo certificates, some Duolingo project ideas, some game ideas. Actually, Pamela here has shared a lot of games. You'll find them here. David has translated a lot of our professional development slides in Spanish. You're going to find these under the Duolingo Educators public shared folder as well. So take a look at that. Feel free to share and let us know in our Facebook group as well a little bit about what you've shared, because I'm sure it'll be really appreciated with the community. As well as just, get some, it's a great place to get some ideas and to brainstorm with one another as well. So I just played restaurant yesterday. Students had to order food and pay the bill with my fake euros. Nice. Have you made your own fake euros, or have you used by chance our Duo dollars? I guess we should probably make some Duo euros or Duo other currency, right? But we do have a resource where we have printable Duo dollars that students are able to utilize as well. It's a great resource, especially for creating a class economy, which I've talked about in another PD session in the past. So I'm really curious, has anyone else implemented some project-based learning? You have some students starting projects in January. Nice. Let me know a little bit about what exactly the project entails for your students in January. I'd be really curious. Yeah, Pamela, I know you do the fake Tour de France around the school, and that's a huge, that's a huge project that you do typically at the end of the year. Of course, around Tour de France, right? when that's happening. Yes, and you did put that in the resource drop. So that's under, should be under projects. And if it's not, it might be under, I wonder if it's under history and culture. I'll have to take a look, but I do know, I have seen it, Pamela, that you've shared it in our resource drop. You counterfeited the euros. Nice. Great. So moving forward, I'm going to talk a little bit now about, soon about swag and how you get swag. But first, I'm really curious about some feedback. What kind of future professional development sessions would you like to see? For those of you who are inner educators at work, you know that I've been running professional development for world language teachers, specifically the past 10 weeks or so. So we're really curious as to what you would like to see in the future. What, ideas or subjects you'd like me to kind of investigate with you and present to you. So let me know what you'd be interested in. It's especially important to us with the Duolingo for Schools team, because we know that world language teachers don't typically get a lot of professional development geared specifically for them. A lot of the professional development offered is probably general for all teachers. So we would like to know a little bit more about what you need as specifically as a world language teacher. And then next, as far as feedback, let me know what kind of Duolingo resources might be helpful in your classroom. What do you need to teach better? What do your students need in order to teach better and to learn better and to utilize Duolingo a little better in the classrooms? Let us know as well. You can let us know by sending us an email at any time at educators@duolingo.com. So let me make sure that I drop this in the chat so you have that. So we have that email, and anytime you could reach out to us, educators@duolingo.com. You could be reaching out to us on the Educators Network and commenting there as well. Myself, I'm there as well as the rest of the Duolingo for Schools team. So you're able to kind of share with us what you'd like to see. And we also do have a form too, if you prefer to fill out as well. So we have this resource form specifically letting us know a little bit about what you'd like to see. And now I'm going to talk about our Educators Network, as I mentioned. So join us on our Educators Network if you're not yet there. It is our private Facebook group where we have thousands of teachers all around the world to utilize Duolingo for Schools, often sharing resources. As I mentioned, we have that shared resource drive. So teachers are sharing things there, talking about tips, tricks. We're posting about events there. And another thing that's really important to us and another reason to join is that the Duolingo for Schools team, as I mentioned, we're all in the Educators Network, and we really turn to the Educators Network for feedback as to specifically with the platform, what you need to teach better. So for example, the classroom leaderboards, which are a new addition to the Duolingo for Schools dashboard. So that idea, came from a lot of feedback from our Educators Network. So we really like to hear and listen to what exactly teachers such as yourselves need. I was a past language teacher, but, in another life, and I'm no longer there. I'm no longer utilizing Duolingo for Schools in the classroom with sometimes hundreds of students a day. For some elementary school teachers, right? Typically, I taught elementary 1 year and I had to teach hundreds of students. So we really need some feedback from current educators who are utilizing the platform. So we really turn to the Educators Network for that. So make sure you join us there. If you're not on Facebook, join us on Twitter, join us on TikTok, Instagram, and connect with us there. So now I'm going to be talking about PD. So if you're interested in giving professional development and of course want some swag, we're going to send the first 50 teachers to download and host any of our PD sessions, because there's been a lot and there's more to come. I've talked about in the past student streak societies, how to utilize the streaks to motivate students. I've talked about classroom leaderboards. I've talked about the Duolingo podcast and different ways to utilize the Duolingo podcast. I've talked about classroom gamification utilizing Duolingo. So I've shared a lot of different professional development. So you're able to download and host any of these sessions, including the one I just gave on project-based learning. So the first 50 teachers to do this, we are going to send them a swag box that includes stickers for your classroom, an insulated Duolingo tumbler, as well as a wool Duolingo beanie and more. So big, exciting swag pack for both you and your students. So we just ask that you download the slide deck, you schedule a PD session, you invite attendees, you fill out a presenter feedback form, as well as ask your attendees to fill out an attendee feedback form. So I'm going to tell you actually a good way to find all of this information is in the Educators Network. But another way to find it is under and this is a good thing to bookmark as well, in our Help Center under Professional Development. You're going to find all of our past PD sessions, as well as any of our upcoming PD sessions. So it's important to, as I mentioned, bookmark this and revisit it often. But when you click into any of these past PD sessions, for the link that I just shared you, you're going to find the slides, and so you'll be able to download them there, as well as any related material that I may have shared during the presentation. So any resources, for example, or any other links that may be relevant that you would need for the presentation. So you'll find all of that there. Let's talk a little bit about how do I recruit attendees. So you could just schedule a PD session with your department. If you, at your school, if you're at your district, you have a world language department, you have other teachers that you could be scheduling a PD session with, we suggest that. If not, you're able to utilize social media to network with other world language teachers, either on Twitter, tag us, we could share it, or on the Educators Network itself. So you're able to join us on the Educators Network and recruit teachers from there, post, see who's interested in talking about professional development and attending a session with you. And as I mentioned, the PD materials, I just shared the link where you could find them all, but they are also available in the Educators Network under guides. So from there, you're going to see slides, you're going to see the presenter feedback form that we ask that you fill out so that we know a little bit of information as to how the presentation went, as well as an attendee feedback form. So of course, we know information from your attendees as to how the session went. And for example, if you are holding a PD during your department meeting, right? Your department meeting might be an hour long. This is about a 25-minute session or so, 20-minute session or so. So you might need ways to beef it up. So you could be discussing techniques from the session. You could be brainstorming new ideas together. You could be breaking out into groups to brainstorm these ideas and how exactly they're going to look in the classroom. And then that really important last step, that actionable item that you could walk away, something done and you feel good about after a department meeting is, for example, creating a new lesson plan that you could be implementing the following day. Any questions at all, make sure to reach out to us at educators@duolingo.com anytime. If you're new to Duolingo for Schools, you could access the Help Center from the left-hand side of your Duolingo for Schools dashboard. You could also be, as I mentioned, the link that I shared, all of our professional developments. We're going to be hosting weekly Duolingo for Schools one-on-one sessions as well. So you'll find it there at that link. So make sure you bookmark that and visit that option to see what we have moving forward. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm going to take a look at the chat, make sure I didn't miss any questions at all. More collaboration opportunities. Yeah, so that's something that you would like to see specifically a PD session around, Pamela, about collaborating, or do you mean collaborating amongst other teachers in the Educators Network? Let me know a little bit about what exactly you mean by the collaboration. We had a game based on the Indiana Jones theme where students had to go and solve puzzles in the target language to get a hold of a special relic or artifact. Oh, I love that. I've played I did a Where's Waldo, and I talked to my administration and I got their permission to post Waldo around the school. I talked to other teachers. I made them aware that student groups are going to be in the hall being respectful and trying to find Waldo and following certain directions in the target language to find Waldo. So that was a really fun way to get them up, get them moving. get them utilizing the target language and finding Waldo. Awesome, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Yeah, definitely. It's nice to talk to people in real time in the Educators Network for sure. So next week, if everyone is available, we're going to be doing Duolingo Educators Network holiday hang as well. So make sure you join us for our holiday hang too, just to talk to one another a little bit about if you have a school break coming up, decompress a little bit with one another. And just get to know one another. So you could join us there. But I hope to see everybody in the Educators Network, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.